Have you ever had someone go from being completely engaged to acting like you don't exist? One day they're laughing, making plans, and responding instantly, then suddenly, silence. No calls, no replies, just distance. It feels personal, but often it's not. When someone starts ignoring you, it's a choice. They won't explain it. They won't confront you. They'll just disappear, leaving you wondering what went wrong. Why? Because people vanish for different reasons. Some no longer need anything from you. Others feel uncomfortable with your growth. And some were never really invested in the first place. But here's the truth. You don't need to chase, beg, or demand answers. The real power is in understanding why it happens and refusing to take it personally. The story of Ethan. Ethan was the kind of person everyone wanted around. Kind, reliable, always willing to help. But one day, something changed. His messages went unanswered. Friends who once sought him out became distant. Conversations that used to feel warm now felt forced. At first he thought, maybe they're just busy. But deep down, a question haunted him. Why are they ignoring me? Frustrated, he turned to his old mentor, Mr. Harris, a retired psychologist known for his wisdom. "Sir," Ethan sighed, "I don't understand. People who once valued me now act like I don't exist. What did I do wrong?" Mr. Harris smiled and handed him a candle and a match. "Light this," he said. Ethan struck the match and the candle flickered to life. "Now, bring it close to that open window." Ethan obeyed. Within seconds, a gust of wind blew the flame out. Mr. Harris leaned back. "That, my boy, is why people ignore you." Ethan frowned. "I don't understand." The old man chuckled. "A small flame stays lit when it's protected, but when it burns too bright, it invites the wind." In that moment, Ethan understood. People don't always ignore you because they dislike you. Sometimes they ignore you because your growth makes them uncomfortable. You were once on their level, predictable, familiar. But when you evolve, improve, or outgrow them, they start feeling small in your presence. Instead of growing with you, they pull away. That night, Ethan made a decision. He stopped chasing explanations, stopped shrinking himself to fit in, stopped feeling bad for outgrowing people who refused to grow with him. And just like that, he found peace. People don't always ignore you because you did something wrong. They ignore you because your light makes their shadows more visible. A candle that burns too bright will always make the wind restless. So don't dim your light just to stay visible to those who refuse to shine. Reason 1. They're testing you. Some people ignore you not because they're losing interest, but because they want to see how you'll react. One day they're engaged, responsive. Everything seems fine. The next, silence. Cold energy. No replies. Why? Because they want to test your patience. If you start double texting, over-explaining, or asking, "What's wrong?" they win. You just proved that their absence affects you, and that gives them control. Think of it like a tug of war. The moment they drop the rope, they're waiting to see if you'll pull harder. But what happens if you don't? The game ends. The moment you stop reacting, they lose their power over you. That's where real strength comes in. Not in proving you care, but in not needing external validation. Reason 2. They no longer benefit from you. This one hurts, but it's the truth. Some people were never there for you. They were there for what you could offer. Maybe it was your support, your kindness, your connections, or simply the way you made them feel. But the moment they no longer benefit from you, they disappear. And that's okay. Because real connections don't vanish the second they stop being useful. The people meant for you will stay, even when you have nothing to give. So when someone suddenly goes silent, don't chase, don't beg, and don't shrink yourself. Some disappear because they were never meant to stay, and some fade away because you've outgrown them. Either way, keep shining. The right people will never fear your light. Have you ever noticed how some people start acting distant the moment you stop catering to them? It's subtle at first. Maybe they stop responding as quickly. Maybe they don't invite you to things anymore. Eventually, you realize it's not that you changed in a bad way, you just stopped playing by their rules. And that's the problem. Some people don't want friends, they want followers. They want people who bend, adjust, and shrink themselves to fit the role they've assigned. But the moment you break out of that role, they leave. And trust me, that's a good thing. The puppet with cut strings. Let's break this down with an analogy. Imagine a puppet on strings. As long as those strings are intact, the puppeteer decides every move, where the puppet goes, how it reacts. Now, what happens when those strings are cut? Does the puppeteer suddenly appreciate the puppet's independence? Do they say, "Wow, look at you standing on your own"? Number. They walk away, because without control, they lose interest. And that's exactly how manipulators behave. They were never there for you as a person. They were there for the control they had over you. So, when someone starts pulling away after you set boundaries, don't see it as a loss. See it as the strings breaking. A personal story, the friend who couldn't handle my boundaries. I had a friend once who always needed something from me, advice, favors, emotional support. And I didn't mind at first because that's what friends do, right? We help each other. But I started to notice a pattern. Every conversation revolved around their problems. Whenever I needed to vent, they changed the subject. When I had good news, they barely reacted. It was as if my purpose was to be their therapist, not their friend. So I decided to test something. I didn't reach out first. I stopped offering help before they even asked. I waited to see if they'd check in on me just because they cared. And guess what? They didn't. They vanished. No more texts. No more calls. It was like I had disappeared from their world. At first it hurt, but then I realized they weren't in my life because they valued me. They were in my life because I was useful to them. And once I stopped being an unlimited resource, they left to find someone else who would play that role. Why people like this act the way they do. If this sounds familiar, here's the hard truth. Some people only stick around as long as they can benefit from you. These are the people who only call when they need something, get upset when you set boundaries, act cold when you stop being easy to control. It's not that they suddenly stopped liking you. It's that they never truly valued you, just what you provided. How to handle people like this. So, what do you do when someone pulls away because you're no longer easy to manipulate? You let them go. Here's how. 1. Recognize the signs. If someone only stays in your life when they're getting something out of it, pay attention. Real friends don't disappear when you stop serving them. 2. Stop explaining yourself. You don't owe anyone a justification for setting boundaries. If someone gets upset because you're no longer bending over backward for them, that's their problem, not yours. 3. Accept that losing them is a win. If someone leaves because you've stopped letting them control you, take it as confirmation that you made the right choice. The right people will celebrate your growth, not punish you for it. Final thoughts. The price of independence. There's a powerful piece of Stoic wisdom that says, the price of independence is the loss of those who only valued your dependence. And that's the truth. Some people were never meant to stay in your life forever. They were only there for as long as they could use you. But the ones who remain, those are the people who truly see you, value you, and respect you, not for what you provide, but for who you are. And those are the only people worth keeping. True independence and growth. Why some people walk away. Independence isn't just about being on your own. It's about standing firm in your values, even when it costs you relationships. The people who respect you will adjust to your boundaries. The ones who only valued control, they'll disappear. And that's not a loss. It's a blessing. I remember someone in my life who always tried to control how I reacted to things. If I disagreed, they'd guilt trip me. If I set a boundary, I was being unfair. For the longest time, I played along, hoping that keeping the peace would fix everything. But one day I stopped explaining. I stopped justifying. I simply stood my ground. And their response? Silence. No argument, no closure, just distance. At first, it felt like a loss. Then I realized it wasn't. It was freedom. How to handle people like this, recognize the pattern. If someone only stays when they can control you, it's not a real connection. Stop justifying yourself. The moment you stop explaining and start acting, they lose their power over you. Let them walk away. If they only valued you when they could influence you, their absence is proof that you're growing in the right direction. Not everyone will celebrate your independence, and that's okay. The ones who leave were never really there for you, just the version of you they could control. Let them go. When your growth intimidates others, here's something people don't talk about. The moment you start growing, some people will pull away. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your progress forces them to face their own stagnation. They liked you when you stayed on their level, when you weren't a reminder of everything they could be but won't work for. But the second you start rising, instead of supporting you, they distance themselves. Imagine you and a friend hiking up a mountain. At first, you're side by side sharing the journey, but then you start pushing harder, climbing higher. They slow down, complain about the difficulty, suggest turning back. Maybe they even resent you for continuing. Then suddenly they stop and say, "You've changed." What they really mean is, "I can't keep up." And instead of climbing with you, they'd rather stay behind. My own experience. I had a close friend. Let's call him David. We were always on the same path, same mindset, same routines. But then something changed. I started focusing on self-improvement, reading, setting bigger goals, shifting my perspective on success. At first, he was supportive. "That's amazing, man, keep going." But as I kept growing, his energy shifted. The playful jokes started. "So now you're better than us?" Then the small digs. "Man, you're too busy for me now." Eventually, I noticed he wasn't celebrating my growth anymore. He was looking for ways to downplay it. One day I asked him, "Hey, I feel like things are different. What's going on?" He shrugged. "You've just changed, man. I don't know. It's like you're trying too hard." And that's when I realized I hadn't changed too much. He had stayed the same. Instead of being inspired, he was intimidated. And rather than growing with me, he chose to step away. How to handle this? Don't shrink yourself. Your growth is not an attack on anyone. It's their battle to fight, not yours. Pay attention to energy shifts. If someone starts distancing themselves when you level up, they were never truly rooting for you. Let them go with peace. Not everyone is meant to continue the journey with you. Real friends won't just keep up, they'll push you even higher. Growth comes with a price. The loss of those who refuse to grow with you. But those who matter? They won't be left behind, they'll rise with you. The truth reveals everything. When you stop tolerating dishonesty, manipulation, or selfishness, something fascinating happens. People start disappearing. Not because you push them away, but because they can't survive where their deception no longer works. They relied on half-truths, hidden motives, and subtle manipulation. The moment you see through it, they're gone. Here's the truth. When you expose someone's real nature, they have only two choices: change or leave. And most, they choose to leave. It's easier to run than to face their own flaws. So don't think you lost them. They lost the ability to use you. Imagine walking into a dark room, everything seems fine, until you turn on the light. Suddenly you see the mess, the dust, the things hidden in the shadows. Now that you see it, you can't unsee it. That's exactly what happens when you recognize someone's true nature. They'll say, "You've changed," but what they really mean is, "You stopped letting me take advantage of you." And here's where Stoic wisdom comes in. The truth only offends those who live a lie. Honest people have nothing to fear from the truth. But those who thrive on deception, they hate it because it exposes them. I remember someone in my life who always played the victim. Every problem, every conflict, it was never their fault. I believed them for a long time, defended them, gave them the benefit of the doubt. But then, little things stopped adding up. Small lies, contradictions, moments where the mask slipped. So I did something different. I started asking direct questions. Their reaction? Instant defensiveness. Suddenly, I was the problem. I was being too harsh, overanalyzing, not the same person anymore. And then, they vanished. No explanation, just silence. Because once I stopped playing along, they had nothing left to gain. So how do you handle this? Don't regret seeing the truth. It might hurt, but it's better than living a lie. Let them go. If someone disappears when they can't deceive you anymore, they were never real to begin with. Stand firm in your integrity. The right people will appreciate your honesty. The wrong ones will run from it. The truth doesn't destroy real relationships. It only destroys the false ones. Let those who thrived on deception vanish. You're better off without them. Being ignored is a blessing in disguise. At first, being ignored stings. It makes you question yourself, wonder what went wrong, maybe even feel unwanted. But here's the truth. Being ignored isn't a loss. It's a filter. People who suddenly stop acknowledging you, who distance themselves for no reason, are revealing something crucial. They were never meant to stay. And instead of mourning their absence, what if you saw it for what it really is? A blessing in disguise. Think of a tree in autumn. It doesn't mourn the leaves that fall. It lets go, because it knows new growth is coming in spring. Life works the same way. Some people are seasonal. They were never meant to grow with you forever. When they walk away or ignore you, they're simply making space for the right people to enter your life. And this is where Stoic wisdom comes in. Do not grieve those who walked away. Be grateful they revealed themselves. If someone can ignore you so easily, they never truly valued you. That's not a loss. It's clarity. I once had a friend who was always around until they weren't. No argument, no falling out, just silence. At first I was confused, hurt. Did I do something wrong? I even thought about reaching out, trying to fix something I didn't understand. But then I made a choice. I didn't chase. Days turned into weeks. And then I realized I had always been the one keeping the friendship alive. When I stopped putting in effort, they didn't even notice. That silence, it wasn't rejection. It was the answer I never knew I needed. So how do you handle this? Shift your mindset. Being ignored doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means they never truly valued you. Don't chase people who choose to leave. If someone's absence is that easy, their presence was never real. Focus on those who stay. Real connections don't require constant proving or pursuit. They just exist naturally and effortlessly. At the end of the day, silence isn't something to fear. It's something to appreciate. Because the ones who ignore you, they just made room for the ones who truly see you.